Free fall.
What Trapjaw did in the recent Masters of the Universe movie by far makes him the best version of the half-human, half-cyborg Skeletor henchman I ever saw, and I have seen quite a few of his versions across comics and cartoons. I am hoping that you don't mind a few spoilers, but yeah, not only did Trapjaw give He-Man a run for his money during the initial part of the movie, he also defeated Man-at-Arms, so much so that Duncan's later dependency on alcohol was in part a result of his loss while fighting Trapjaw. The villain not only used his various tools from his mechanical arm, but also showed some great fighting skills, and since he bewildered this humble fan of Masters of the Universe, it was only natural for me to make a video on it. And in this video I am going to explore everything about Trapjaw's anatomy, including some pretty awesome details, like when he ate the most powerful substance in Eternia and nearly defeated He-Man, or when he actually became so strong that He-Man had to ask for help from his greatest nemesis ever. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Skeletor is the main reason behind Trapjaw's mechanical jaw. So according to the fourth and final issue of Icons of Evil comic book, Skeletor himself was responsible for turning Trapjaw into this horrific and horrid metal-mouthed monster. In fact, Trapjaw gets a backstory that not only gives him some caliber, but also makes his past a nasty chapter in his storied villainous life. The story begins with Cronus openly criticizing Skeletor, and he really told some insulting things to the skull-faced Dark Lord. Oh, and yeah, Trapjaw's name before he became Trapjaw was Cronus. So Cronus told him that ever since he had lost his face, he had become irrational and unworthy to lead. Now, saying that to Skeletor was never going to end well, and needless to say, it did not. Skeletor knocked him out cold and ordered Beastman and Whiplash to throw him far away from Snake Mountain. You see, Skeletor wanted Cronus to learn that he could not survive alone in the Dark Hemisphere, more so because the entire region had become plagued with rival bandits after the rise of the Mystic Wall. So yeah, this was not exactly a peaceful exile. Additionally, the region was in a constant state of war and turmoil. Food was scarce and the threats to life were immense. And as was expected, as soon as Cronus was thrown out of the safety of Snake Mountain, he was looking right at the face of danger. Let me correct myself. Mortal danger. Bandits ambushed him and he was heavily outnumbered, but not outpowered, and he not only defeated his attackers, but also became their leader. After that, he took them to a large encampment, killed the general there, and claimed the men as his army. But this was only the beginning. This was only the first of many armies that Cronus would infuse into his ever-increasing clan. Over time, Cronus led several successful raids, and every defeated enemy got the same offer: join him or die. Once his army had become large enough, he decided to return to Snake Mountain and take the fight back to Skeletor. In fact, this had always been his goal, to lead a host so strong that Skeletor shuddered in his bones. Once Cronus began moving towards Snake Mountain, Triclops warned Skeletor that his Doomseekers had confirmed reports of Cronus and his massive army. But Skeletor responded by firing the Havoc Staff at him in anger. This guy almost always shoots the messenger. His own messenger, that is. Anyway, while Cronus' forces fought Skeletor's creatures below, Cronus climbed the mountain and faced Skeletor himself, determined to end Skeletor's reign of terror and faulty leadership so that Cronus himself would lead the greatest army Eternia ever saw. The fight was brutal. Skeletor burned Cronus' face until it turned green, but then he went a step further and just blew off Cronus' right arm. He blew it to hell. It was so wild, a certain world leader would have called it epic fury. But that's not all. To drive his point home, Skeletor punched his attacker so bad, he simply destroyed his left jaw, and it was bad. Very, very bad. But anyway, Cronus was not done yet, and although he was short of an arm and his lower jaw, he reached for Skeletor's shoulder with his left hand in a pathetic attempt to strangle him. But Skeletor thought he was begging for mercy, since he was impressed by everything Cronus had built during exile and how he amassed an entire army. Skeletor spared him and ordered Triclops to repair him. Later, Evil Lyn mocked Cronus because she believed he had begged for life, but Cronus corrected her, saying that thing about keeping friends close and enemies closer, and that's when we finally see that Cronus now had a metal jaw and a cybernetic sort of an arm, and the comic ends with Cronus rechristening himself as, yep, he now was Trapjaw. Castle Grayskull power absorption. Almost defeated He-Man with Castle Grayskull's power. The Menace of Trapjaw is the story where Trapjaw accidentally got what Skeletor had been trying, or rather dying, to steal for ages, and Trapjaw became so powerful that he literally knocked He-Man down, so much so that the hero would have never been able to stop him alone. The story begins with Skeletor once again obsessed with Castle Grayskull and the immense power within its walls. After several failed attempts to force open the drawbridge with magic, he came up with a more roundabout plan. Instead of breaking into Grayskull directly, he decided to travel to another dimension, move to the exact spot where Castle Grayskull would exist in that world, and then open a portal back to Eternia from inside that matching space. I mean, for Skeletor, that was actually a pretty clever scheme. He opened a doorway to a strange world that had such close alignment with Eternia that a ghostly version of Castle Grayskull appeared in front of him. He then opened another portal inside that phantom image, which should have dropped him right inside the real castle. But before Skeletor could step through, he saw a strange cyborg flee from the roof of a nearby fortress. This guy had a mechanical lower jaw, a mechanical arm with a laser cannon, and a bunch of futuristic soldiers with energy weapons after him. In his hurry to get away, the cyborg collided with Skeletor and knocked him back through the first doorway, which then closed behind him. The cyborg fought his enemies for a moment, but their firepower forced him to retreat through Skeletor's second portal. And yeah, that portal sent the cyborg into Castle Grayskull instead. A short time later, Eternia had another problem. At the royal palace, He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Teela rushed to meet an elderly King Randor because terrible earthquakes had been shaking the planet for the past hour. Randor believed Skeletor had to be involved, so he sent them to Castle Grayskull before the tremors could destroy Eternia. The heroes arrived in the Wind Raider and Talon Fighter, only to find Skeletor outside the castle, confused and clearly not in control of the situation for once. Before they could do much, another shockwave damaged their vehicles and forced them down. He-Man confronted Skeletor and demanded answers, but Skeletor told him that the quakes were not his fault. The concussions were actually coming from Grayskull itself. Then the drawbridge opened and out came the cyborg, now wrapped in power drawn from the castle. When He-Man asked who he was, the cyborg introduced himself as Trapjaw. On his own world, he had only been a criminal, but Grayskull's power had turned him into something far beyond that. In his own words, he had become a god, and Eternia would be the first world he conquered, or so he claimed. Man-at-Arms and Teela attacked first, but Trapjaw dropped them with his laser cannon before they could reach him. He-Man charged in next and punched him straight in the metal jaw, which should have meant something, but Trapjaw barely reacted. Instead, he blasted He-Man as well, and suddenly the guy who had stumbled into Grayskull by accident had taken down Eternia's greatest hero in front of Skeletor. Needless to say, that must have burned Skeletor worse than any spell, because Trapjaw had gained the power he had chased for so long without even meaning to. Skeletor attacked with his half of the power sword and sent monstrous magic bolts at Trapjaw, but even that failed. Trapjaw deflected the spell and boasted about his new invulnerability. However, He-Man had recovered enough to see the one possible answer. As much as the idea disgusted him, he suggested that he and Skeletor join forces. Skeletor agreed because Trapjaw had become a problem for both of them, and the two brought both halves of the power sword together. Their combined strike hit the energy tether between Trapjaw and Castle Grayskull, and the explosion cut him off from the castle's power. Trapjaw fell unconscious and powerless, which finally ended the earthquakes. Skeletor immediately saw the drawbridge still open and made a run for it, because of course he did, but the castle shut him out before he could enter. Skeletor then picked up the unconscious Trapjaw and claimed him as a new servant before he vanished. Cyborg durability and mechanical body. Trapjaw's cyborg body has always been a core factor why he is so much different from the other henchmen of Skeletor. I mean, when you see so many creatures that look like beasts, apes, and fish, a cyborg-like being does tend to stand out. He is part human and part machine, which only means that he can take a lot of brutal punishment. I don't want to call him a sink for incoming damage, but he can take a beating in ways a normal warrior probably could not. In the 2026 movie, this whole concept concept of him being a durable evil warrior with cyborg durability was pushed even further. In fact, this latest live-action version of Trapjaw was described as a much more half-human, half-robot creature, with mechanical legs, a prosthetic jaw, and a weapon arm, although the weapon arm was taken care of through visual effects. Furthermore, Trapjaw's mechanical body allows him to be more than muscle during a fight. Like, he is not very big or bulked up if you think about it, and yet he has managed to defeat multiple foes. More recently, Man-at-Arms in the 2026 movie. His right arm can house a lot of different weapons, including but not limited to a claw, a hook, and a laser gun, while his steel jaws are also pretty damn diabolical. And it is said that his bite force is something even He-Man must be wary of, cause it can bite through almost any material on Eternia. But more on that later. Mechanical jaw that can bite through anything. The episode titled Double-Edged Sword was where Trapjaw really shined, albeit for a fleeting moment, but it did show the things he could do, or maybe the things he could eat. So the episode starts with Man-at-Arms in the palace admiring himself in a full-length mirror, and in all fairness, it was cool to see even Eternia's top weapons expert needing a vanity break now and then. Once he was done with that, he took King Randor and Prince Adam down to the Energizer Chamber and gave them some bad news. The palace's supply of Eternium was almost exhausted, and without more of it, everything on the planet would grind to a halt, because it was that tiny rock of Eternium that powered everything, everywhere, all at once. And let's just take a moment to absorb how ridiculous this is, cause, I mean, Eternia had magical castles, flying vehicles, and laser weapons, but somehow no one had bothered to check the fuel gauge until the last minute? Very royal administration, that. Anyway, the story then takes us to this desert where a young boy named Chad had found a chunk of Eternium while messing around with a gun. The palace soon learned about the Eternium, so Adam, Tila, Cringer, and Orko were sent to retrieve it before things got worse. Over at Snake Mountain, Merman and Trapjaw were feeling left out because Skeletor had gone away and left them behind, and that too in shackles. Once they heard about the Eternium, they decided to grab it for themselves, and Trapjaw simply bit those heavy chains binding the two henchmen. They intercepted Chad and his grandfather, but then Tila arrived and saved the day, or saved the hour at the very least. Adam then became He-Man and finished a fight with a monster that Merman had unleashed on Tila, the grandfather, and the kid. However, Trapjaw managed to get his hands on the Eternium, because he believed that because Eternium was the most powerful substance on Eternia, and if he ate it, he would become the most powerful person on Eternia, which, by the way, was absolutely correct. Needless to say, that was not how food usually works, but in this case, this preposterous nonsense actually paid off for a while. Trapjaw swallowed a fair chunk of the Eternium, and became powerful enough to overpower He-Man for a short time. So yeah, once again, Trapjaw became as powerful as He-Man himself, this time through eating Eternium. And if you think about it, this aspect makes Trapjaw really dangerous, because he could become nigh invulnerable and extremely strong with the right power source. And in this form, he could even beat the crap out of Skeletor. And that's why one must never really discard Trapjaw as merely one of Skeletor's metal-mouthed henchmen. He actually had He-Man in trouble. But as I mentioned earlier, the effect of Eternium did not last for very long. And once the Eternium wore off, Trapjaw ended up crushed under the weight of a rock that he was planning to hurl on He-Man. In the end, Trapjaw and Merman were sent to the prison mines, where he could eat all the rocks he wanted. Of course, these punishments and imprisonments never mean much in this franchise, because the villains always find their way back sooner or later. Welder/self-repair tool. In the 18th episode of the 2002 He-Man and the Masters of the Universe series, titled Trust, Trapjaw does a lot of things, including showing off his self-repair skill. After Merman was broken out of the Eternian prison by Triclops, the Masters realized that their prison walls were not exactly built for keeping these evil supervillains for long time periods. I mean, if Skeletor's boys could break each other out that easily, then the kingdom really needed to check its prison system, and the material with which they built their prisons. That was when Stratos brought up Eternium, the strongest substance known on Eternia, and offered to search for some in the Ice Mountains. Like he believed that if they made their prisons with Eternium, no one would be able to pull off another prison ring. Interestingly, the other story with Eternium from the OG series showed that Eternium was actually very brittle. Anyway, Man-at-Arms gave him a handheld scanner that could detect unusual metals, and Stratos set off, but he left during harsh weather conditions. And as you can possibly expect, Skeletor learned about this almost at once through Triclops' Doomseekers. Skeletor then sent Trapjaw after Stratos, and Trapjaw became instantly interested in the Eternium in question, probably because he watched the Eternium episode from the original series. I mean, this time around too, the idea of becoming invincible appealed to him a lot, although he was not thrilled about going alone. Skeletor assured him that the rest of the evil warriors would follow if Eternium was actually found. Stratos found traces of Eterniums pretty soon, and that's despite the harsh weather condition. But before he could properly locate the deposit, Trapjaw attacked him. Their fight turned ugly, and both of them ended up thrown into the icy caves beneath the mountains. Stratos injured one of his wings, while Trapjaw broke a leg, which meant neither of them could afford to act too proud for long. But it was not before long that Trapjaw managed to take care of his broken leg. Meanwhile, Stratos managed to get the upper hand and took Trapjaw's weapon, but their situation became worse when they realized they were not alone. Something inside the caves was after them, and whatever it was, it had forced them into an uneasy truce. Back at the palace, the Masters lost contact with Stratos and became worried because the mountain storms had grown worse. Adam then noticed He-Man nearby, which was his usual little excuse before he transformed and headed toward the ice mountain. Meanwhile, He-Man reached the area and found what he first believed was Triclops' vehicle, but Skeletor and the other evil warriors had already arrived. They overpowered He-Man and sent him down an icy crevice, so for a while both rescue attempts were going about as well as one would expect on Eternia. Inside the caves, Stratos and Trapjaw searched for a way out. A hole in the ceiling seemed to be their best chance, and Trapjaw's grapple could help them reach it. But before they could escape, the creatures broke through the snow. Trapjaw saw his chance, headbutted Stratos, and let him fall unconscious to the cavern floor. That was when the creatures were finally revealed as the Kulitaks, a hidden people who lived in the ice mountains. They surrounded Stratos and took him to their village. When Stratos woke up, the Kulitak leader accused him of trying to steal their Eternia. Stratos explained that he had not known their people existed, and that the Masters would never take anything from them by force. He asked them to trust him, but Trapjaw soon arrived and tried to convince the Kulitaks that he was the honest one. The Kulitak leader decided he needed time to judge them, so both Stratos and Trapjaw were locked in a storage room. However, the room also held a crate of Eternium, which was not an accident at all. Trapjaw immediately tried to eat the metal because he believed it would make him invincible, while Stratos tried to stop him. That proved the whole point. The Kulitak leader had staged the test and now knew which outsider deserved trust. Unfortunately, Skeletor arrived soon after and tried to seize the Eternium for himself. Stratos stopped him from harming the Kulitak leader, but took an injury in the process. Thankfully, He-Man broke through from above and turned the fight back in the hero's favor. Skeletor and his warriors fled, while He-Man helped the Kulitaks protect their Eternium. In the end, Stratos thanked them for the lesson, because trust was not built on words alone. It was proven by actions, and Trapjaw, needless to say, had failed that test in record time. The 18 craziest weapons and tools Trapjaw can use from his mechanical arm. Trapjaw's mechanical arm was quite the jack of all trades. I mean, having a mechanical cyborg arm is one thing, but it's a totally other thing to have an entire toolbox attached to it. And depending on the situation, Trapjaw could turn from a henchman into a laser unit or a repair crew, or even a battering ram at times. Dude, he could even fly by fixing a rocket to his mechanical arm. And I know people don't really see him for how dangerous he is. I think even he does not know his full potential. But the fact of the matter is that he remains one of Skeletor's more practical evil warriors, because even when his plans failed, at least he brought options. I think the hook was the attachment that most fans probably still remember from the Filmation cartoon, and that's mostly because that installment of the IP used it more than anything else. Then there was the Lasertron, which appeared as a gun and could work as a freeze ray, a shrink ray, or a regular laser weapon. So yeah, although the name might sound slightly silly, the tool itself had a hell of a lot of a range, you gotta admit. Then there was this thing called the Energy Bow, which was a one-time alternate to the Lasertron, and shot a laser from the center of the bow. But the sword blade is interesting because it initially had a very small role, and it appeared, I think, at the end of a single episode, but then it returned in the movie. Trapjaw also had attachments that were more field gear than weapons. For instance, the pile driver worked like a mechanical battering ram, and the dropper served him as a winch. In fact, in the episode where he eats Eternium, he uses the dropper to lower Merman over a cliff, and he also used the grabber in the same episode. This device could extend outward and had claws, so it helped him grab objects from far away, while the fly swat briefly appeared in one episode but never actually got used. The claw, which came with the original action figure, barely appeared in Filmation, but the MYP cartoon gave it more room because that installment of He-Man and Masters of the Universe paid a much closer attention to the toy's 3 original pieces. Oh, and by MYP, I mean Mike Young Productions. Anyway, these are many tools and weapons, but of course that's not all. You see, Trapjaw also had several more, specialized stuff at his disposal. The miniature laser was basically the hook attachment without the hook. The flamethrower appeared in the Cave of Winds, and hilariously enough, he also had a fire extinguisher to control the fire if things went wrong. He also had an elongated laser, plus a large freeze ray cannon in the She-Ra episode Assault on the Hive. That same style of attachment doubled as a rocket in the same episode, which allowed Trapjaw to fly because apparently the arm could solve travel problems too. The MYP series made his arm even more functional, and as we discussed earlier in the episode called Trust, he used a welder to repair his damaged leg and later used a grapple to reach a hole in the Kulatox cavern. And in the movie, his cannon mode became his default combat option. So yeah, that was pretty much it in this video. If you liked it, please feel free to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Those 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos. Stay safe and have a good one.